What is up, everybody? Turboverse TV here today, and we're going to talk about this recent revelation that Microsoft may have declined an offer from Marvel. Well, getting exclusive Marvel content on an Xbox or an Xbox One generation. So the Xbox One and PS4 generation was probably like the biggest drought for like Marvel video games in general. I don't think there was pretty much any Marvel video games besides Spider-Man on the PS4 and like pretty much like the Lego Marvel games. But other than that, I don't think there was any like Marvel games. And it's like every other generation, literally every other generation I can think of that's been gaming wise. There's always been an abundance of Marvel video games, superhero games on those systems. So it's kind of interesting that apparently back in like 2014 is when Marvel reached out to Xbox for an exclusive Marvel IP, and they declined it. So this guy posted, Marvel reached out to Microsoft, Xbox, and Sony PlayStation about making games. Xbox passed on the deal and said they wanted to focus on their own games. Meanwhile, Sony jumped at the opportunity, and that's why Spider-Man is an exclusive, and why in 2022 Xbox still has Forza, Gears, and Halo. So he is trying to trash talk Microsoft because that's his whole MO, but with Microsoft Xbox, but to be honest, with Microsoft's position back in 2014, it kind of would make sense. Okay, this is what he was talking about, but it kind of makes sense to me, and I'll explain why after I read this one. But apparently, this is like from a quote when being asked about it. Being from console first party in my past, I pinged both sides, both Xbox and PlayStation, and said we don't have any big console deals with anyone right now. What would you like to do? Microsoft's strategy was to focus on their own IPs. They passed. Okay, so they went with PlayStation for the Spider-Man IP. Well, it kind of makes sense for Spider-Man because Sony owns the movie rights, so why not make a video game with Spider-Man? So that makes sense. But back in that time period, when like 2014, it doesn't make any sense for Microsoft to get one of these Marvel exclusive games because let's see, the MCU was very popular, sure, but it's kind of like no superhero game has did extremely well in sales wise. Like I think the only one that probably did that well sales wise is probably like the Batman Arkham series, but the rest of those superhero games they didn't do too well in sales. Like people are hyping up the Wolverine game now, but we had Wolverine games before in the past and they never did too well. Even the Spider-Man games didn't do that well, but they were like received highly. People love those games, but they weren't really like big sellers. Only like big seller really got was recent with the Spider-Man 2018 game, the most recent one, the Miles Morales one. And like the Arkham series, that's pretty much about it. And we had like superhero games like every generation. Sure, they was like well received, but a lot of those games didn't do too well in sales wise. Like they didn't do that well. So I can see why Microsoft didn't go with Marvel back then to make an exclusive game. But after they're seeing the success of the MCU right now, if Marvel did ask them the same question right now, they probably would jump on it because the MCU is big right now. People are loving the MCU. Each one of their movies are doing are hitting records right now. So yeah, so I can understand why they passed in 2014. People want to blame Phil Spencer or whatever. Like, what does this guy say? Phil Spencer took over Xbox March 2014. Marvel approached Xbox in August 2014, so he's blaming he was blaming Phil Spencer for this. And I was like, who would actually know that at this point? Like, who would know that Marvel they would do that well at this point? Yeah, they're not mind readers. They're not mind readers. They can't predict the future. That Marvel be such a popular IP right now because several points Marvel has gone bankrupt at several points. It's just like now recently that Marvel is just like unstoppable right now, especially in the movie theater. So yeah, I mean I don't blame them at this point. I'm not gonna have be like screw Phil Spencer for skipping on his decision to get Marvel back then, because like who would have known these games would do so well at this point? But yeah, it's kind of thing they passed on, which is very interesting. I do kind of wish they did though, because there still is a kind of a lack of superhero games, even though, like I said, last generation was probably the main drought of superhero games, but this generation is kind of a drought too, to be honest. I mean, there's a plethora of some coming out, but there still is like a major drought. I remember like 360 generation and PS2 generation, there were so many superhero games, but now there's not very many at all. So let's see. So Xbox fans should blame Microsoft then. This kind of makes sense. Actually, this was during a time when Xbox execs believed single-player games were a thing of the past, and everyone in multiplayer games, only thank goodness they were proven wrong. Yeah, I think that kind of was the mindset back then. They thought single-player games was a waste of time, but we see that they changed their stance on that because that wouldn't have worked out too well. Most people don't like playing online games like that, so that was definitely a bad thought process right there. Iron Man released in 2008, so everyone knew MCU was going to be huge. No, they didn't. Like, that movie was good, but that was the beginning of the MCU. Nobody knew that the whole MCU was going to be as big as it was today until, like, the Thanos, until maybe, like, the Thanos stuff started getting real big when it was, like, you started, like, tying them all together, tying all the movies together. Like, I mean, I don't know. I'll say maybe, like, what movie came out? Probably, like, Civil War. Probably like when Marvel Captain America 3 Civil War came out. And that's when everybody realized Marvel was like super huge at that point when they saw Spider-Man and the Avengers movie. Because sure, the other Avengers movie, sure, the other stuff did well, but nobody knew it was going to be as big as this. Like, as big as this right now. I say probably like when the Civil War movie came out, that's when everybody knew this was like the biggest thing ever at this point. So, Spider-Man, if it was made by Microsoft and one of their studios. Yeah, and what if they did what if they would have went with this whole decision and they would have got a game like Avengers, the Marvel Avengers game that nobody likes? They still would have been hating on Microsoft. So who knows? Nobody can predict the future at this point. There has been many actors that came out and said, "Hey, we wish we would have took this role." Like people, like I know, like Will Smith said he could have did the Matrix, but he turned down that role. He's probably regretting that ever since they announced the big success it was. So it's like with anything, you can't predict the future. It's like oh well. It's like sometimes it's not the best decision, but it's like who would have predicted it though? So especially since the previous history shows these games don't do that well. So. They wouldn't be able to do it right away, so let's thank Phil for passing up the opportunity. The Marvel/Sony deal was about Spider-Man was about to make a Marvel game and to be treated like a first-party game, marketing-wise. Okay. What? Microsoft focusing on the original IPs? How dare they? Yeah. It's best to make this stuff to make their own stuff the best, so I don't see a problem with that, to be honest. And people can say, hey, it kind of bit them with the Halo Infinite, but Halo Infinite, it's like they try something new. When people say they want these companies to try something new, they try something new with the whole free-to-play model. It obviously is not working right now, or didn't. It's not just kind of flopping with the whole free-to-play model, but I mean, they try something new, so give them credit for that at least. I mean, Spider-Man is overrated. I mean, it is the most popular like superhero. I think that is the most popular superhero worldwide. So I don't know. So he's overrated. Okay, cool. But they're all great games / franchises, respective to their owner / platforms. People still probably complain that Marvel had to deal with Microsoft. I literally just don't get it. Yeah. Sony owned Spider-Man. They were going to have it regardless. Did you legitimately not remember that, or are you just reaching so hard you've got the main reason why it was exclusive in the first place? Yeah. I mean, I just don't find this to be a big deal, to be honest. But this is what people are talking about. It's like the major controversy right now, but I don't really care, to be honest. It's like I don't really care. We don't know if they would have made an exclusive game, if the game would have been good or not. There's no way they could have predicted that the MCU and Marvel popularity to be this high right now. So, who would have knew? Thank God they passed on it. I don't know what type of Xbox. I don't know what type of game Xbox would have given us, but I know it wouldn't have been the masterpiece game we have today. Phil was right to decline. I guess this should stop bots from be about Spider-Man being exclusive, since they have the chance to, but turned it down. How would that have worked? Because let's just say Spider-Man was an Xbox exclusive game. Then it's like Sony owns the rights to the Spider-Man movie, so that'd have been a very weird, that'd be a weird time period at that point. It's like Xbox Spider-Man's an Xbox exclusive game, but Spider-Man is owned by Sony. That'd be weird at that point. Yeah, they should still get something with DC at this point. Yeah, they should probably get something with do a deal with DC, but then again, they just really just copy Sony at this point. I don't know. If they really just need to copy Sony at this point, but it's just interesting. It's just real interesting about this video game history that happened. But I don't really care regardless. People, I guess, what are people gonna be angry at Microsoft now because they passed on a Marvel deal? I mean, Nintendo had a Marvel deal. I mean, they had their exclusive game, but people don't really talk about that game at all, really. That Marvel Ultimate Alliance 3. People don't really talk about that game, so that could probably have been an Xbox exclusive game, but that wasn't too favored. You know what? I like Microsoft. Honestly, they knew that they were incapable of making a great Marvel game, so they passed on the offer. They know that they are talentless. He says that while they've won a major award last year for major publisher of last year. It's like, these people forget that they won the big awards when they say that the studio is just talentless. Like, it just doesn't make any sense to me. This is why we haven't had any games for like 5 years now. Microsoft launched 2 new systems, Xbox One X and Series X. If you count the Series S with 0 new titles to take advantage of the new hardware, unbelievable. That's why Spider-Man is mid and Halo and Forza are game of the years. Yeah, Marvel Avengers and Guardians of the Galaxy both are on Xbox consoles. Seems to me Marvel and Xbox has a decent partnership. I'm sure future Marvel games will come over Xbox, but sure Sony has Spider-Man, big whoop. Yeah. I mean, that is kind of true. We are getting all of the Marvel games besides the Spider-Man one, so I mean, it's not like they completely abandoned Xbox. So, well, Microsoft is dumb. Even Nintendo took it and made Marvel Ultimate Alliance 3. I mean, that game was fun, but people don't really talk about that game like that, so I don't think people really care about that game like that, to be honest. Like, that's probably like in the ones where, that's probably like in the same category of video games, of superhero games that were just like average. Like, people don't clamor over Marvel Ultimate Alliance 3 like they did with Batman or Spider-Man, so it is what it is. We don't care about that game like that. Which also, more than Spider-Man, hold this L. Okay. What is this last comment right here? Oh, man. I wonder how Halo's going for them right now. Yeah, they can make fun of Halo, but it's like they took a risk with that game by going to free-to-play. They never did free-to-play before at Halo. They took a risk and it didn't work out. So, I mean, it is what it is. You fanboys wink too hard over Spider-Man. Phil Spencer, terrible businessman, apparently laughs in Bethesda and Activision Blizzard acquisitions. He's a terrible businessman, but they're calling what he's doing right now monopoly. So, make that make sense with that and Activision Blizzard deal. Yeah, so I'm gonna conclude it right here. This is just Sony fanboys just having a circle jerk, as they say right here, about this decision, saying this Phil Spencer is not talented or whatever. But it's like, who would have knew back then? To be honest, who would have knew how big Marvel would be right now? So definitely want to see your thoughts down below. Do you think this was a good decision or a bad decision by Xbox back in 2014? This is like when Phil Spencer was just like announced to be head of Xbox, like probably like a few months in or 5 months in or whatever. Not even a full year, but this is one of his first decisions to make, and he turned it down. Let me know if you think that was a bad decision or not. Let me know your thoughts down below. Leave a like if you like this video. As always, thanks for watching, and peace.